Grace stood in a thick fog. 3 figures seemed to be emerging from it. As she slowly approached, the figures became clearer. It was her husband and 2 children. Grace wanted to rush forward and take hold of them, but they just looked at her coldly, their eyes filled with hatred and blame, and they gradually disappeared. In panic, she screamed, "No, wait for me, don't leave me alone." With a scream, Grace woke up from her nightmare. She crawled up and breathed a sigh of relief. She lived in a beautiful villa, 2 stories high, with over a dozen rooms on each floor, a little castle. As the day began to break, Grace looked outside. The window was still shrouded in thick fog. It seemed that at some point, the fog had completely covered the small island, like a malevolent figure blindfolding a maiden. Outside, 3 people approached, an old man, an old woman, and a young woman. They were talking and laughing, making their way to the castle's entrance. The old woman rang the doorbell. The door opened, and Grace peered out. "Can I help you?" The old woman said, "Oh, ma'am, we are the servants." Grace looked at the 3 of them and said, "Come in. I didn't expect you so soon." The 3 walked in, and Grace asked, "What are your names?" The old woman said, "I am Mills," pointing to the old man, "This is Tuttle." Tuttle bowed. Grace asked, "Are you the gardener?" Tuttle nodded. Mills pointed to the young woman and said, "She is Lydia." Grace looked skeptically at Lydia and asked, "Do you have experience as a housemaid?" Lydia timidly nodded. Mills said, "She has a baby face, but she's actually quite old." Grace asked, "Can you iron clothes?" Lydia nodded again. Grace was slightly displeased, "Why aren't you speaking?" Mills replied, "She can't speak, she's mute, but she is very agile." Grace nodded, "All right, the previous girl was just too clumsy. Mills, you and Lydia will stay in the attic. Tuttle, you'll sleep in the storeroom at the back. The room's a bit messy, the servants disappeared a week ago, and no one has cleaned since." Mills asked, "They left without a word?" Grace led them to the attic, talking as they went, they vanished, without a sound, even without taking their wages. Mills slowly said, "How strange." Grace opened the door, "You will quickly learn, this house is not easy to manage. That's why I stated in the job advertisement that I needed honest and hardworking people." Mills laughed, "No one is more honest and hardworking than us, right Tuttle?" Tuttle also smiled stiffly, "That's right." Grace then took them to the kitchen, "I have breakfast at 8, the children at 9. Lunch is at 1, and dinner at 7:30. When Grace went to open another room, Mills asked, "Ma'am, where is the master?" Grace suddenly froze, then turned around after a while and said, "He went to the battlefield a year ago, and there has been no news since the ceasefire." Mills gave an apologetic smile. Closing the door, Grace specifically instructed, "Remember, 15 keys open 50 doors. One room must be closed before another can be opened, or light will come in. Mills, starting tomorrow, I will give you a set of keys. Take good care of them." Mills nodded. Grace said, "This is the music room. Don't let the children play with the old piano randomly. It gives me headaches. In this house, silence is more important than anything. There are no phones, radios, or anything that makes noise. There's also no electricity, the Germans cut it off during the war, and we've gotten used to living without it." As Grace was about to open another room, Mills stopped her, "Actually, there's no need to inspect all the rooms." Grace sternly replied, "It's necessary. The house is often pitch dark, you must know it like the back of your hand." With a serious look, she added, "It's time to meet my children." Grace took Mills and the others through several doors and then instructed Tuttle, "You go clean the garden first, the tools are in the storeroom." Tuttle nodded and left. Grace had Mills and Lydia draw all the curtains, plunging the house into darkness. Grace lit a kerosene lamp, leading Mills and Lydia up the stairs, around several corners, and stopped in front of a room. "I'll go wake them up," she said, wait here, and don't open the curtains. Grace entered the room. Mills and Lydia peered inside but saw only darkness. They heard Grace saying, "Wake up, it's time to pray." The children's prayers echoed, then Grace stood beside them with a lamp. Two children, a boy and a girl, both around 6 or 7, stood before them. Mills exclaimed, "What lovely children! I'm Mills, and what's your names?" The girl replied, "Anna." The boy said, "Noah." Mills smiled, "Those are beautiful names. I'm your new nanny." "Hurry up, it's time for breakfast," Grace urged. She handed the lamp and keys to Lydia. "Go and close the kitchen window." Lydia took the light and left. Grace lit another lamp. The doctors can't find a solution. The children are extremely sensitive to light and must not be exposed to anything stronger than this, or they will develop rashes and breathing difficulties, leading to asphyxiation. In severe cases, it could be fatal. Mills seemed very surprised. "My goodness, how did this happen?" Grace, somber, shook her head, not noticing the subtle, eerie smile on Mills' face. At the dining table, Anna complained, "The toast tastes strange, not as good as before." Mills smiled, "That's because it was made by someone else." Anna asked, "When will they come back?" Mills stroked Anna's head, "They're not coming back." Noah suddenly interjected, "Like Dad, not coming back." Anna glared, "Dad will return, he's just fighting in France." Mills said, "All right, no more talking. Finish your breakfast." Anna looked at Mills, "Will you leave too?" Mills smiled, "Of course not." Anna said, "The previous servants also said they wouldn't leave, but they did. Something happened." Noah whispered, "Stop saying that." Mills asked, "What happened?" Anna whispered, "Mom went mad." Noah shouted, "There's nothing wrong." Anna yelled back, "There is." Grace entered the room, angry, "What's going on?" "Eat your food." The children lowered their heads again, but Anna's eyes were filled with unspeakable fear. Grace took Mills outside, staring at her fiercely. "The postman collects the mail every Wednesday, but I checked the mailbox, and he didn't come last week." Mills looked puzzled, "I don't understand what you mean." Grace pulled a letter from her pocket. "It's a job ad that should have been sent to the newspaper 5 days ago. But it wasn't published." "Who are you really?" Unfazed, Mills replied, "We were just passing by, trying our luck. A house like this usually needs experienced hands. Actually, we worked here a long time ago. We came back to look and found you needed servants." "Suspicious," Grace said, "So, you're familiar with this house?" Mills smiled, "Inside and out." Grace sighed, "Fine, stay. The children sometimes talk nonsense. Don't believe them, after all, they're just kids." Mills obediently nodded and returned to the dining room. Anna and Noah were still arguing. Mills watched the two children, a mysterious smile on her face. Anna and Noah were laughing in the study, and Grace brought out the textbooks. "Now, you two work separately." The children became anxious. "We'll be scared if we are separated," Anna said loudly. Grace replied angrily, "You've been in this house for so long, what's there to be scared of? What if we see a ghost?" Noah whispered. Grace turned to look at Anna. "Are you telling ghost stories again?" Anna protested loudly, "I didn't say anything." Grace said to Noah, "If you see a ghost, just say, 'Hello,' and keep studying." Then she turned to Anna and said, "Follow me to the music room." Anna asked angrily, "Why do I have to go?" Grace, annoyed, replied, "Because I said so. Take your book." Anna grabbed her book angrily and walked towards the door. Grace patted her son's head and told Anna to wait by the door. She then went to instruct Mills to draw the curtains before letting Anna leave. Standing by the window, looking at Tuttle clearing the garden, Grace asked Mills, "Do you have kids?" Mills replied, "No." Grace then asked, "Was Lydia born mute?" Mills shook her head, "I don't know." She was like this when I met her. At that moment, a child's crying sound was heard coming from the study. Grace immediately remembered Noah was in the study alone, reciting his lessons. She quickly ran to the study and opened the door, only to find Noah sitting there, reciting. Grace hugged her son. Why were you crying just now? Noah blinked. I didn't cry. The crying sound grew louder, but it came from another direction. Grace shouted, Anna, and ran towards the music room. The crying haunted Grace as she stormed into the music room, only to find Anna lying on the floor, reading her book. Anna looked up. I haven't finished my lessons. Seeing Anna was unharmed, Grace was relieved. Why were you crying just now? She asked. Anna replied, I wasn't crying. Grace sat down in front of her daughter. I clearly heard someone crying. Don't be embarrassed, sweetheart. Anna still denied, I wasn't crying. If I had cried, I would tell you. Grace was getting angry. Do you think I'm imagining things? I clearly heard crying. Anna looked down at her book. It was Vincent crying. I told him to be quiet, but he wouldn't stop crying. Grace was surprised. Which Vincent? Anna answered, the boy who was here just now. He was very rude and told us to leave this house. Feeling uneasy, Grace got up and looked at the curtains. Then why was he crying? Anna said, he doesn't like this house but insists on staying here. He said his father is a pianist. Grace closed the piano lid and sarcastically said, did you also talk to his father? Anna seriously replied, no, I only talked to Vincent. His father and the others were in the living room. Grace lost her temper. I just passed through the living room, and there was no one there. Anna thought for a moment, then they might be checking the rooms upstairs. Grace angrily shouted, enough, Anna. Tell me why you were crying. Anna stubbornly said, it was Vincent crying. He went out through that door. Grace, unable to control her anger, pointed at the door and shouted, the door was locked. How did he get out? As she said that, she suddenly froze. The door was half open. Grace rushed into the hall, shouting at Mills and Lydia, who were busy working. I made it clear that one door must be closed before opening another to prevent light from entering. Do you not understand? This house is like a ship, and light must be kept out like water, only relying on doors being opened and closed. Your negligence endangers my children. When Mills tried to explain, Grace sternly interrupted, don't argue, shut up. Who was the last to enter the room? Terrified, Lydia shook her head. Mills softly said, she doesn't have the keys. Grace shouted, then it was you. Mills explained, I was just in the living room, then went to the garden. You saw it yourself. Grace mocked, you think I would be so careless as to endanger my own children? Mills and Lydia exchanged a glance and didn't say anything more. In the middle of the night, Anna woke up a sleeping Noah, pointing to the window for him to look. Noah was shocked. Why did you open the curtains? Mom will be mad. Anna said, it wasn't me, it was Vincent. He has been messing with the curtains all night. I closed them, he opens them. Noah curled into a ball, frightened, you're scaring me again. I'll tell Mom. Anna called out to the window, Vincent, come out from behind the curtains and show my silly brother. Noah, breathing heavily, peeked at the curtains, then quickly hid under the covers, trembling, don't scare me. Anna said, don't you want to see him? You're such a coward. I guess I'll have to do it myself. She jumped off the bed and walked to the window to close the curtains. Suddenly, the curtains were pulled open again. Anna ran back to bed, Noah, tell him to stop messing with the curtains. Noah hid under the blanket, not daring to move. He heard a boy's voice, get out of my bed. Anna shouted, it's our bed. Noah, almost in tears, pleaded, Anna, stop making scary noises, I'm scared. Anna glanced at her brother, don't talk, coward. She turned to the window, if you keep messing around, I'll tell Mom. You know how scary she is. The boy spoke again, you haven't met my parents, they're even scarier. Noah cried out, Anna, I'm going to tell Mom you're scaring me. Anna, frustrated, said, you fool. It's not me. Vincent, touch his face so he knows. Suddenly, a hand touched Noah's face, and he screamed, help, Mom. Help. Grace rushed into the children's room, Mills following behind. Noah clung to his mother, she scared me, she pretended to be a ghost. Grace, furious, shouted, I've had enough, you've gone too far. Anna screamed back, it wasn't me. Anna was punished to read the Bible out loud and confess to the Virgin Mary. Anna was defiant. I didn't do anything wrong, you can't force me to confess to the Virgin Mary. Grace shouted angrily, you told your brother there's someone else in the house. Anna yelled, there is. Grace suppressed her anger, there is no one else in the house. You are lying. Anna screamed, no, I'm not. Mills walked towards the living room, carrying a tray of tea. Seeing Anna sitting on the stairs, she gave her a sympathetic look before walking into the living room. Grace was sitting on the sofa, doing embroidery. Mills placed the tea tray on the table. Grace asked, is Nicholas asleep? Mills responded, he's sleeping like an angel. How long are you going to punish Anna? It's been 3 days now, and you've had her reading the Bible on the stairs. Grace put her needlework down. That depends on when she admits she was wrong. I might need to find a priest to enlighten her. Grace put aside her embroidery and looked out the window. I feel completely isolated. The fog has been here for so long, not even a seagull in sight. Mills also looked thoughtfully at the dense fog outside. Grace suddenly said, Mills, I can't stand Lydia walking loudly upstairs, making it sound like there are a bunch of people. Please tell her that cleaning doesn't require such a fuss. I don't want my headache to come back again. Mills said, I'll let her know. She then left the living room. As Grace continued with her embroidery, the heavy footsteps from upstairs grew louder. Even the chandelier started shaking violently. There were sounds of things being bumped into. She couldn't stand it any longer, stood up, intending to scold Lydia, only to find Lydia standing outside with Mills. Grace, puzzled, walked out of the living room and saw Anna still reading on the stairs. What was going on upstairs? Did you hear any sound? She asked. Anna replied, no. Grace slowly walked up the stairs, listening carefully. Suddenly, the sound of a piano playing emerged. She grabbed Anna's shoulder, who is making that noise? Anna shook her head, I said there's someone in the house, and you punish me. What do you want me to say? Grace patted Anna's face, tell me the truth, is someone upstairs? Anna pointed behind her, in the storeroom. Grace gently walked to the storeroom door, opened it, and saw no curtains drawn inside. Worried about light reaching Anna, she quickly stepped inside and shut the door behind her. The room was filled with old furniture covered with white cloths. Grace looked around nervously. Suddenly, she heard whispering in her ear, shoo, it's a woman. She quickly turned, but there was no one. The whispering resumed, and fear overtook her eyes, but she couldn't see anyone. Then, someone touched her from behind, and she spun around as if jolted by electricity, frantically pulling off all the white cloths, but they only revealed old furniture. Suddenly, the door opened automatically, and she ran out. Anna was still outside. Grace yelled, where did they go? Anna pointed everywhere, here, and over there. They said this house is theirs and we should leave. Grace screamed madly, this house has been besieged for 5 years, and I haven't let anyone in. Now, someone is trespassing. Mills, holding Nicholas, approached, this is an old house, the floorboards and pipes often make noises. Grace, agitated, responded, you can clearly hear voices, a boy and 2 women. Anna pulled out a drawing, this is what I drew yesterday, Vincent, his dad, Mom, and an old woman. The four faces in the drawing were twisted and sneering. Grace shivered, pointing to the numbers above each person. What does this mean? Anna said, it's the number of times I've seen them. The old woman the most, 14 times. Grace, horrified, covered her mouth. Mills, fetch Tuttle. We need to search the house before dark. Mills agreed and left. Anna pointed at the old woman in the drawing and said, Mom, she's always staring at you, saying, follow me. Grace stood up, don't lie. I'm not lying. She keeps asking questions, and her breath stinks, Anna insisted. Grace grabbed a rifle, pull all the curtains, search every dark corner. Everyone got to work. Noah said, maybe they're ghosts. Anna fiddled with her doll, don't be silly. Ghosts wear white sheets with chains and go boo. Mills said, what the books say isn't always true. Grace found an album in a clutter. She carefully opened it. Inside were yellowed photos. Strangely, everyone in the photos had their eyes closed, as if they were sleeping, giving off an eerie feeling. The doors suddenly opened, and Mills walked in. Ma'am, every corner has been searched, there's no one. Grace nodded, pointing at the photos, what's going on? They all look like they're sleeping. Mills looked and said, they're not sleeping, they're dead. This is a post-mortem photo album. In the last century, people often took post-mortem photos to remember the deceased and hope their souls would continue to exist in the world. As Grace flipped through the album, shocked, she said, there are even group photos, oh my God, and children. How superstitious. Mills said, loss can make people do unthinkable things. It was a cold evening in early winter. Grace invited Mills to sit by the fire. Tell me about your time here. Did you have children too? Mills rubbed her hands, no, I only managed the household. Back then there were 15 or 16 servants. But they all left, only the three of us stayed. Grace asked, why did they leave? Mills responded, there was a plague. The master moved to London, and later, we left too. But sometimes, even if people leave, their hearts stay. Grace walked into the children's room, they were asleep. She stroked her daughter's hand, Anna, I've been too harsh. Please forgive me. She wiped her tears and walked to the door. Noah suddenly opened his eyes, Mom, when is Dad coming back? She choked, after the war. Her son asked, why did he go to the war? No one's bullying us. She stroked his head, because he's brave, he won't submit to the Germans. Back in her room, Grace felt lonely and helpless for the first time. She called out her husband Charles's name, crying silently. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a piano. Trembling, she grabbed her rifle and ran towards the music room. As she neared the music room, the piano sound grew louder. Grace pushed the door open, and the sound abruptly stopped. The room was empty. She approached the piano, closed the lid, and locked it with a key. She softly backed out, walked around the house without finding anything unusual, and pushed the music room door again. There was resistance this time. It felt like someone inside was pushing against her. Grace tried several more times but met with resistance each time. Finally, she gave a big shove and let go. The door sprung open, knocking her to the ground. She got up frightened, watching the doorknob turn furiously from inside. The door was locked from within. Running frantically, Grace screamed, Mills, get me the key to the music room. Mills rushed over. Grace took the key and quickly opened the music room. It was empty again, but when she looked at the piano, she trembled, the lid was open once more. Grace sat at the table, looking despondent. I checked the rooms. There's nothing in them, but I feel that something is definitely there. Mills handed her a sedative, which Grace accepted. She continued, it's not human. There's something in this house, something malevolent. Maybe, the restless spirits. She glanced at Mills. I know you don't believe me. I didn't believe it before either. Mills suddenly said, I believe you. Grace was taken aback. Mills looked into her eyes and said, I've always believed. Though it's hard to explain, I think sometimes the boundaries between the spiritual and physical worlds can intersect. Grace waved her hands dismissively. That's impossible. How could God allow such things to exist? The living and the dead can only meet at the final judgment. That's what the Bible says. Mills replied earnestly, not everything has a reasonable explanation. A chill ran down Grace's spine. She abruptly stood up, put on her coat, and said, I'm going to visit Father Matthew at the village and bring him here. Mills chased after her, saying, You should wait until the weather clears. Grace turned and shouted, I must bring him here. We need his blessings. She then ran into the thick fog. Tuttle was raking fallen leaves when Grace passed by. She said, Tuttle, look around the garden for any gravestones. When we bought the place, we heard there might be a small graveyard in the woods over there. Check it out. Tuttle agreed, but as Grace walked away, she added, See if there's a family buried there. Is there a boy named Vincent? After Grace ran out the gate, Mills approached Tuttle and whispered, She says the house is haunted. Tuttle watched Grace's silhouette vanish into the fog, worried. Isn't it dangerous for her to go out in this fog? Mills reassured him, Don't worry, she won't get far in this thick fog. Tuttle then asked, When will we reveal the truth? Mills, looking ahead, responded, Soon. Tuttle uncovered a half-buried gravestone in the piled-up leaves. He quickly covered it with more leaves. Grace walked through the woods for a long time, only to realize she was circling back to the same spot. In a panic, she started running. The fog thickened around her, and all she saw was a white void. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. Her heartbeat quickened. As she stepped back, a shadowy figure emerged from the fog. Finally, the figure reached her. With wide eyes, she gasped, Charles. The man called out joyfully, Grace. Grace embraced her husband tightly, years of sorrow and bitterness pouring out. You're finally back. I prayed every night for your safe return. Where have you been? She cried into Charles's clothes. Charles held her close. I couldn't find my way home. Grace caressed his face, You've changed a lot. Charles looked at her, Yes, sometimes there is blood. As the fog began to clear, Grace led her husband back to the castle. As soon as she entered, she said excitedly to Mills, My husband is back. Prepare some hot water, clean clothes, and something to eat. Mills, stunned by the sudden appearance of the master, stammered, Yes, ma'am. The children were asleep when Charles approached their beds. Softly, he asked, My little darlings, how are you? Anna woke up instantly and hugged her father. Noah followed suit. Anna proudly said, See? I told you Dad would come back. Charles, with tears in his eyes, asked, Have you been good? Listening to your mother? The children replied in unison, Yes, we study the Bible every day. Charles hugged his children tightly. While Grace and Mills were preparing lunch, they saw Charles coming out of the room. Grace, happy, said, Dear, lunch is ready. Will you join us, or? But before she could finish, Charles had already retreated back into his room and closed the door. Seeing that Charles didn't come down for lunch, Anna asked, When is Dad coming down? Grace softly replied, He's tired. He needs to rest first. Anna asked, Mom, where do people who die in the war go? Grace replied, It depends on whether they fought for justice or evil. Anna pressed on, How do you tell who's fighting for justice and who's fighting for evil? Grace said, You're asking too many questions, and anyway, you're not going to war. Noah sighed, Anyway, we can't go anywhere. Grace set her knife and fork down, What does it matter? Being with Mom and Dad is the happiest. We love you the most. Anna chimed in, and what about those uninvited guests? Grace solemnly said, there are no uninvited guests here. Anna, not understanding her mother's sudden change of attitude, shouted, but you said there were. Grace sternly replied, let's leave the matter at that. Don't say another word. Dad is back, everything will be fine. Frustrated, Anna yelled, can't I even speak? Grace, equally angry, shouted back, no, you will not speak to your father about this. Anna threw her spoon and breathed heavily in anger. Grace, increasingly angry, shouted, Anna, stop breathing like that. Do you hear me? Stop. Seeing Anna unresponsive, she yelled again, go to your room. No dessert for you today. Mills was cleaning up in the kitchen when she saw Anna running in, crying. She went to her and wiped her tears, stop crying, or you'll become ugly. Anna, sobbing, said, I wasn't lying. Mom is being unreasonable. Mills knelt down and said, I've seen them too. Anna asked, puzzled, are you serious? Mills nodded. Anna said, why don't you tell Mom? Then she'll believe me. Mills shook her head, there are some things your mom won't listen to. She only believes what's in books. But she will see them eventually. Everything will change by then. Eyes wide with curiosity, Anna asked, what change? Mills mysteriously replied, you'll find out in time. A big change is coming. That night, Mills, Tuttle, and Lydia sat around a fire in the storeroom. Mills said, she's pretending everything is fine. Tuttle asked, what about her daughter? Mills replied, she's not stubborn. Children are easier to manipulate. The problem is with the mother. Tuttle asked again, what about her husband? Does he suspect anything? Mills said, no, he has no idea where he is. In the living room, Grace helped Anna try on a christening gown. I made this veil for you, my beautiful daughter. Anna looked in the mirror and said, I look like a bride. Grace placed the veil over her daughter's head, yes, but I need to shorten the sleeves. Now take it off. Anna pleaded, no, let me wear it a little longer. I promise not to get it dirty. Grace kissed her on the forehead, all right, but don't sit on the floor or brush against the walls. After Grace left, Anna danced in front of the mirror for a while, then started playing with toys. Since seeing the children, Charles had locked himself in his room, saying nothing. Worried, Grace entered the room quietly. Charles was still lying on the bed. Grace approached him gently, Charles, don't be like this. Tell me what's on your mind. Charles stared blankly ahead, motionless. Grace hugged him from behind, humming a song from their youth. Charles's eyes flickered briefly before returning to emptiness. Grace, disappointed, left the room and sat outside, silently crying. She heard her daughter singing in the living room and went to her, Anna, take off the dress now. Anna was sitting on the floor. Grace, angry, said, I told you not to sit on the floor. Without looking up, Anna continued playing with her toy, the floor isn't dirty. Grace approached her daughter and said, it doesn't matter. Suddenly, she widened her eyes in shock. Anna's hand holding the toy looked like a withered twig. Grace moved slowly in front of Anna and lifted the veil. Beneath it was a wrinkled, shriveled face, eyes bulging, giving an eerie chill. Grace remembered Anna's drawing and asked nervously, where is my daughter? What have you done to her? The mouth under the veil moved, you've gone mad. I am your daughter. Grace, crazed, lunged at her, shaking her violently, no, you're not my daughter. Using all her strength, Grace knocked her to the ground and tore off the veil from her head. Grace stared wide-eyed in terror. She saw Anna standing there with disheveled hair, a pale face, and tears streaming down her face. Mills rushed in as well, what happened? I heard screaming. Anna ran into Mills' arms, crying, she tried to kill me. Grace shook her head in agony, no, that's not true, how could I? Mills held Anna and said, It's okay, don't be afraid. Come with me. Mills carried Anna out of the room. Grace stood there trembling, not understanding what was going on. Grace splashed cold water on her face. Mills came over and asked, "What happened?" "Anna is still very upset, I took her to her father." Grace, choked with sobs, said, "That wasn't Anna." It was an old woman with strange eyes, mimicking Anna's voice. "I swear to God, it wasn't her." Her head began to hurt again. Mills put a cup of water on the table. "Don't worry about the house. Leave it to us, we know what to do." Grace looked at the 2 pills on the table and asked, "What are these?" Mills replied, "Headache medicine, the ones you always take." Grace sighed, "You can leave, I need some time alone." Once the door closed, she quickly flushed the pills down the drain. She realized that all the hallucinations had started after these 3 people arrived. Could the medicine be the cause? Maybe Anna had been drugged as well. A chill ran down her spine. Grace walked wearily into the room. Charles was sitting on the bed. He said, "Anna told me everything." Grace said, "I suspect there's a ghost in the house." Charles responded, "I'm not talking about ghosts. Tell me about that day. What happened?" Grace closed her eyes, "I don't know. The servants all left in the middle of the night. They wouldn't tell me the reason to my face." Charles asked, "Did you hit the children?" Grace looked up sharply, "They know I love them. I would die for them." Charles walked to the window and picked up his coat. Grace asked, "What are you doing?" Charles hesitated, then said, "I have to go." Grace's voice trembled, "Where?" "The war is over." Charles said sadly, "Not for me." Grace cried, "Don't go. You've already left us once. You can't leave again. Why can't you stay like others do?" Charles responded despairingly, "I don't know. All I know is that I don't belong here." Grace broke down in tears, "I've kept us in this darkness, this prison. But as long as I have the children and you, I am content." "Why can't you be content, why?" Charles silently embraced his wife from behind. They held each other tightly and lay down on the bed. Morning came. Grace opened her eyes to find the bed empty. Charles had vanished. She ran to the front door and looked out at the woods, sobbing uncontrollably. She didn't know where Charles had gone, but she felt instinctively that he would never return. Suddenly, Grace heard her daughter's piercing scream. She rushed into the bedroom to find Anna and Noah huddled together under the bed, screaming. She looked up and saw the window, sunlight. Despite the thick fog, light was flooding the room. The curtains were missing. Grace quickly took off her coat and covered the children's heads, leading them to another room. But no matter where they went, the curtains on the windows were all gone. There was nowhere to hide. Grace grabbed a blackboard and blocked one of the windows, shouting for Mills. Mills opened the door, watching Grace without speaking. After securing the light, Grace ran over to uncover the children's heads. "It's okay, my dears, you'll be fine." Anna cried out, "I want Daddy." Grace hesitated, then said, "Daddy's gone." Anna didn't believe her, "You're lying." After settling the children, Grace ran into Mills' room and grabbed Lydia, who took the curtains. "Speak. Write it down if you can't talk." Mills pulled Lydia into her arms, saying, "She can't write." Grace shouted, "The curtains are gone." "Who took them?" Mills replied, "We saw them being taken. Maybe someone wanted to let in the sunlight." "What's wrong with that?" Grace almost felt like she had misheard. "What are you talking about?" "Sunlight will kill my children." Mills asked, "Why?" Grace was on the verge of collapse, shouting, "Didn't I tell you? Sunlight will kill my children." Mills laughed, "You've never let the sunlight in. How do you know it will kill them?" Tuttle walked in, "Yeah, my sister-in-law used to have rheumatoid problems, but she got better with sunlight." Maybe the children should try it. Grace grabbed a shotgun. I don't care what you're planning. Get the curtains back, then leave immediately. The three servants approached her slowly. Grace pointed the gun at them, saying, "Give me the keys." They neither moved nor spoke. Grace shouted, "I know what you're planning. From the first day, you've been trying to take over this house and scare us away. Give me the keys, and we'll call it even." Mills slowly handed over the keys. Grace yelled, "Get out." The three exchanged glances and slowly left the room. As they walked out, Mills remarked, "Tuttle, what do we do now? We can't go on like this." Tuttle nodded, "I agree. I think it's time to reveal the graves." It was already 9 p.m., and Grace was still searching for the curtains. Anna and Noah had quietly climbed out the window and were heading into the woods, hand in hand. Noah said, "We're lost. How will we find Dad?" Anna replied, "Silly, we haven't even left the gate. To find Dad, we need to get past the village." They walked for a while. Suddenly, Noah stopped, pointing into the distance. "What's that?" Anna looked. "It looks like a graveyard." Saying that, she ran towards it. Noah, frightened, said, "Don't go. What if a ghost jumps out?" Anna turned back and said, "There are no ghosts in the graveyard, only skeletons." She ran to a gravestone and closely examined the inscription. Her mouth opened wide in horror. Nicholas was calling her to come back, but she seemed unable to hear, frozen in fear. The gravestone read, "Mills' grave." Anna slowly turned to see Mills, Lydia, and Tuttle approaching behind Noah's small figure. Meanwhile, Grace had searched every room without finding the curtains. Only Mills and Lydia's rooms remained. She entered with the gun and searched thoroughly. Under Mills' bed, she found a photograph identical to those in the post-mortem album. The people in the photo were Tuttle, Mills, and Lydia. Shocked, Grace stood still for a moment before suddenly running downstairs frantically. Anna screamed frantically, "Noah, come here. They're ghosts, come on." Noah turned and saw the three figures approaching. "No, they're not. You said ghosts wear white sheets and chains," he said. Anna yelled, "Forget what I said. That was a lie. Hurry up and come." Noah saw the urgency in Anna's expression. He looked back at the three figures approaching and finally realized what was happening. He sprinted towards Anna. She grabbed his hand and they ran towards the house, shouting, "Mom, save us." Grace had reached the ground floor and found the children missing from the room. She ran outside and encountered the children running back, Mills and the others following closely behind. They seemed to be moving slowly, but their speed was deceivingly fast. Grace led the children into the house and pointed the gun at the three figures. "Don't come any closer, or I'll shoot," she warned. The three kept advancing, unfazed. She fired several shots, but the bullets had no effect on them. Mills continued walking forward. "We died from the plague half a century ago." Grace retreated into the house and locked the door. The three figures stood outside but did not pass through the door. Grace cried, "What do you want?" Noah sobbed, "We saw their gravestones outside." Grace hugged the two children. "Quick, hide upstairs. Remember, don't separate, stay together always." Anna ran up a few steps, then came back and kissed Grace on the cheek. Grace smiled through her tears. From outside, Mills said, "We're here to help you, to make you understand the situation of the house." Grace gradually calmed down. "What situation?" Mills replied, "We need to learn to coexist, the living and the dead." Grace shouted, "You're all dead. Leave us alone." Mills sighed, "We can leave you, but what about them?" Grace shuddered, "Who are they?" Tuttle answered, "The intruders." Grace shook her head vehemently, "There are no intruders. You're the ones causing trouble." Tuttle said, "They're with your children now. They'll find you sooner or later." Grace shouted back, "No intruders." At that moment, screams from the children upstairs broke out. She trembled, "Noah, Anna. Where are you?" Tuttle said again, "The intruders found them. We can't help. You'll have to deal with them yourself." After Anna pulled Noah safely upstairs, they hid in an armoire. Initially, they only heard their mother's calls. Gradually, voices filled the room, as if people were discussing something. Even Noah could hear it now. Frightened, he asked Anna, "What's that sound?" Anna whispered, "Don't be scared. I'll go look. Wait here." She bravely stepped out, seeing the old woman she had often seen before, sitting at the table, along with Vincent and his family. Only the old woman seemed able to see Anna. Grace stumbled up the stairs, hearing the old woman's voice from the room, "Children, don't be afraid. Come, talk to us." She slowly opened the door and finally saw them. 5 people sat around the table, turned to look at the door, but appeared not to see Grace. The old woman with strange eyes sat in the middle, writing and sketching continuously. Anna and Noah stood by the side. The old woman asked, "Tell me what happened." Noah cried, "Don't tell her, she's not nice." Anna spoke to her brother, "If we tell her, she'll leave us alone. Otherwise, they'll keep scaring us." Anna moved closer to the old woman and whispered in her ear. The old woman finished a piece of paper, and a man next to her took it, saying, "It seems to be about a pillow." The old woman loudly declared, "She killed you with a pillow, didn't she?" Grace was horrified, covering her mouth. Anna and Noah screamed, "She didn't kill us. We're not dead." The old woman asked, "Children, you are dead. Why are you still in this house?" Both children cried, "We're not dead, we're not dead." Grace clutched her head, feeling as if it would explode. She ran and flipped the table, grabbing the papers and tearing them to shreds. Vincent's parents only saw the table overturn and the papers disintegrate on their own, causing them to cry out in fear. The woman's strange eyes gradually returned to normal. She took a breath and asked wearily, "What happened?" The man next to her said, "Your séance was successful. There are 3 spirits in this house, a mother and 2 children." "Interesting, isn't it?" Vincent's mother, furious, exclaimed, "Interesting. I was scared to death. We cannot stay here any longer. Those ghosts don't like us." Her husband said, "We haven't figured out what's going on here. This house is cheap. Should we reconsider?" She shouted, "That woman is insane," suffocated her own children with a pillow and then shot herself. Isn't that clear enough? Think of our son. Vincent keeps having nightmares about seeing that girl and sometimes the mother too. The spirits won't leave, even hiding the curtains didn't help. We're moving, leaving this house. The man, reluctantly, agreed, "Okay, we'll move tomorrow morning." Grace sat on the stairs, holding her 2 children, tears streaming down her face. "That day, I received the death notice, then I knew nothing. When I became aware again, I didn't understand why the pillow was in my hand, why you weren't moving, why the servants had fled. Then, I realized I had killed my own children. I had put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger. Later, I woke up and heard you laughing in the bedroom as if nothing had happened. I thought God had given me a second chance, telling me not to give up, to be a good mother." "Mom," Anna asked, "where are we now?" Just then, Mills walked in and said, when Lydia realized we were dead, she asked the same question. After that, she stopped speaking. Grace looked helplessly at Mills, who smiled and said, "Let's have some tea, man. The intruders will leave, but new ones will come. Sometimes we will feel them, sometimes we won't. It's always been like this." Grace, with tears in her eyes, smiled as Mills walked away. Quietly, Noah asked, "Did Dad die in the war?" Grace caressed his head, "Yes." She thought for a moment, then added, "I don't know much more than you, but I know I love you." This house is ours, and we will never be separated. Anna slowly walked to the window. Sunlight pierced through the fog, bathing her in light. She extended her hand. Mom, look, it's fine. Vincent's family moved out, and a "for sale" sign went up again on the castle gates.